Welcome to the Reimagine podcast. Each week, give yourself 30 minutes and meet the people working hard to create the future of insurance today.
Hi, this is Paul Tyler, and welcome to another episode of the Reimagine podcast. Laura, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. It is great to be here, Paul, once again, reporting live from Connecticut and all over really the U.S. Happy to have another episode today and looking forward to diving in on a very exciting topic. I think it's something that people will be able to relate to, whether they're a startup or they're working with a large corporation, et cetera. It's something where it's going to hit home, I think, for most of us.
Great. And who do we have on our show today?
Sure. So joining us today, we have Ellen Last, Principal of Slalom, and Maura Rucker, Senior Director of Experience with Slalom. So these two individuals have joined us today to speak more about, the hybrid realities that companies are facing, whether it's hybrid work and or becoming or remaining obsessed with the employee and the value that brings not only to the employee, the company, but also to the end consumer as well.
Well, welcome.
Awesome to be here. Thank you for having us. Yeah.
So, first of all, maybe you could just tell us, who is Slalom, and what does Slalom do for its clients?
I'd be happy to take that. Hi, everybody. My name is Maura Rucker. Slalom's a consulting firm in Hartford. We're really happy to be embedded in Hartford culture, as well as supporting clients. We primarily focus on strategy, technology, and transformation. And at the core of that is experience. It's something that Ellen and I are very passionate about talking about, and look forward to talking to you all today.
Yeah, and Ellen, just maybe talk a little bit about your background before, and Maura, I'd be interested to hear your personal backstory, how you got to Slalom and got to work on interesting problems like this.
I always love when Maura and I talk about our experiences in tandem with each other, because we came from such different places, yet landed side by side doing, the same work that we're both so passionate about. And after, I've had several career changes in there, but most of my time has been spent as a digital product manager. I spent a lot of time in the startup space, specifically education technology, and also some time at Lego, which Maura and I was the first time Maura and I worked at a company together, though not together. And but our fate was really to work together at Slalom and to bring, and what I've really done is brought my product management experience, and as somebody that was very obsessed with the customer experience and sort of always advocating and sort of always pushing the business to think about the customer and how do we serve the customer better, to parlaying that into experience design and working alongside with Maura to just build awesome experiences that solve human problems.
Yeah. And Maura, how'd you get here?
So Ellen said, I'm lucky to work with Ellen daily. We have had kind of a similar, we've tracked similarly in terms of our backgrounds. I've also worked in startups and larger companies such as Lego. There I was on the shopper marketing team and, really enjoyed understanding from a shopper consumer perspective how we were enabling people through designing experiences. My degree is in industrial design, and I found myself working in healthcare. Started recognizing it just wasn't designed for people. This was a little while ago, but still it wasn't that long ago. And then ended up kind of writing a thesis about design for people to empower them as we age. And then kind of found my way to Slalom. I'm currently leading our experience team. And one interesting thing we've done fairly recently in the last year, we've ended up kind of merging three different teams. So we just merged our customer experience team, our experience design team, which Ellen leads, as well as our organizational effectiveness teams. And we've done that because we've recognized those are all of the people-focused teams. But as Ellen said before, specifically the org effectiveness team, we focused on primarily the employees. And we also felt like when we were looking at larger projects, as an example, like a technology project, the employees were always the last ones to get trained or, to understand how we were going to implement something. So because we merged this, we want to focus more on employees to ultimately create better customer outcomes. That's also going to be a theme of what we're going to talk about today when we start looking at what our hybrid way of working is, how we focus on all of us and all of the people we're designing for in the employee setting to create better business and customer outcomes.
So you talk about the word experience, and I think a lot of us, when we hear experience, we think in person. And I know that our conversation today is going to be around the hybrid sense of the word, but for the audience's sake, can you tell us a little bit about what you mean by experience in this case?
Ellen, do you want to take that?
Yeah. How do you?
It's a big one.
Big one. Well, and it's interesting that you bring it up because this is something that we talk about quite a bit as a team, right? And it's probably something that has different meanings to different people. But ultimately, at least in our world as consultants, our job is to come in and solve problems for companies, and we're problem agnostic. But the solution to every problem is ultimately interfacing with somebody. We are solving that problem for somebody. That customer might be an end user of your product, somebody that buys your product, and they're experiencing what it's like to be a buyer of your product. That customer can also be, and you can see the theme here, your employee. So, we come into projects and sometimes they're customer facing or they're B2C, but sometimes they're completely internal and oftentimes they're internal. But the customers of those products or those solutions are maybe data analysts, maybe they're product managers, maybe they're customer service agents. They're all having an experience. They're all experiencing whether it's a process, whether it's a bureaucratic approval process. There might be a few of those out there, I'm not sure. Just hypothetical scenarios. That can be anything. So, experience is just broad. I mean, Maura and I are having an experience right now of what it's like to be on your podcast. And we complimented you on this wonderful intro video you gave us ahead of time so that we felt prepped and knew and had our tech all ready to go. So that was an experience that you created for us as guests on your podcast. I don't know. How did I do, Maura?
That was great. And, to piggyback on that, and I'm going to paraphrase Maya Angelou, but one of her most famous quotes is, "It's not people aren't going to remember what you said; they're going to remember how you made them feel." So that's a lot of what we talk about when we talk about experiences. We were also listening to Simon Sinek this morning at Slalom. He talked to us globally, which we were so lucky. And one of the things he said too was, we were talking about workplace culture, which is very much, what we're talking about right now too. It's not just about giving people free food. It's about how you make them feel when they show up to work. Mm-hmm. How do I feel when I'm thinking about my day, when I'm preparing for my day, when I show up at I'm sitting in my dining room right now because we don't have an extra office. Wherever people are going to, regardless if it's in the office or if it's remote, how do you make them feel? So that really hit home. For Ellen and I were talking about that, and that quote really hit home.
Yeah, well, I tell you, there are a lot of mixed up feelings today with return to office programs that get announced, then reeled back, and then rolled out again, and. So tell us, you've actually your company's actually invested a lot of resources to come up with a model to help guide companies to create that experience that works going forward, not is kind of rehashing what once was but won't ever be again. So tell us about the work you've done in this space, and it's called Ethos, correct? Is this the name of the model?
It is, and it's kind of been a parallel effort. Slalom's a consulting firm, so by nature of what we do, we get the fortune and opportunity to go into businesses and kind of have a broad and kind of deep understanding of a bunch of different businesses and their needs and how to be successful. And over the past year and a half, we've been helping them with how they go back to work, how they reimagine their work. And so, we've had kind of a bunch of experiences helping companies do that. And then kind of in parallel to that, we've also done our own just dedicated research about best practice for back to work. So it's called Ethos. Kind of the 3 tenets are focusing across business, customer, and employee. And then, Ethos itself is an acronym that starts out with like engagement and talent and goes throughout. So just understanding that it's not just kind of as Ellen said earlier, it's not one size fits all. I think the other driving point we always talk about is it's iterative. If there's anything we've all learned in the past, year and a half to 2 years we've been in this pandemic, nothing stays the same. We can't plan for anything really, for a long period of time. So we want to make sure, however we're approaching reimagining work, we're approaching it from an iterative lens. We have new reflections every day. Just kind of being mindful of digesting those reflections, actually taking the time to reflect. Ellen and I were actually in the office the other day, and we were sitting there talking with one of our other peers and just kind of took a step back and like, wow, we are actually having an in-person conversation right now. But then it felt kind of uneasy a bit because we weren't in a meeting. We weren't showing as green on Teams. We probably went down to maybe yellow, like we were inactive. And it's that anxiety of, oh my gosh, I'm not in a meeting. I've been in meetings throughout the day, every day for a really long time. That's become the gauge of productivity. And it's not been, it's nothing that we've all, established or really talked about, but it's just become a bit of a mindset, and we've been in a bit of a spiral. So the 3 of us, it was just so nice to be in that setting, but I'm glad that we kind of just talked about it and recognized that as well, and reflecting on those experiences are part of how we reimagine how we all keep working.
Yeah, well, it's I think it's interesting to us, the work you've done for a couple of reasons. One is, hey, we're living it too. we're not in a giant corporation, but it's not small. And Laura and I in our team, we've made a lot of change. We had a lot of changes in how we're working together and over the course of a year. At the same time, we're also trying to help startups, navigate the whole process of re-engaging with customers. Our value prop as an incubator was, hey, come to our office. We'll have these great in-person events. You'll get to, the defenses will be down, and you get more authentic, honest interaction between startups and line officers, people who run lines of business. Well, boom, that's gone. How do companies who are trying to work with big companies engage with these companies when the engagement model is evolving? So maybe you can share a couple stories. Do you have a story or two you can tell about companies that have sort of evolved the right way? They've tested change, and ended up with a better experience for their clients or for their customers and for their employees.
I think you have a good example, Maura.
Yeah. Paul, I know you had the guy that was talking about design thinking in one of your previous podcasts. This is something that's very near and dear to our heart. Elle and I are both design thinking practitioners, and design thinking is leveraged for a lot of how we approach Ethos. There's something else we'd love to talk about. It's their digital whiteboard tools, which I just want to, Ellen can touch upon that too, just how that's changed how we work. But one of the scenarios with a client that we were supporting, this is called a Reimagine podcast. Theirs was called a Reimagine How We Go Back to Work. And that was a company that was fairly traditional. They said it themselves. They had a kind of a presenteeism culture where I have to see you to know that, you're doing work, you're being productive. And they recognized that was an issue. They just didn't know how to kind of get out of that their own way. So they hired us just to run design thinking sessions to focus on people. So that was the first, step in the right direction. And it was interesting. Some of the questions they were posing to us were along the line of, How do we know teams are being efficient? How do we make sure they're getting their tasks done? Once we started getting into these sessions, it was just so much more fruitful, and the input we were getting from the people was just more around. They were interested in innovation and driving the business forward. So we ended up coming up with these, again, back to the word experience themes. So when we talk about, I don't know if it's best practice, I think it's good practice, understanding what those experience themes are for what you're designing. If you're designing a website, or if you're designing, how you want to bring your team and reimagine how they work. But their experience themes, it kind of feels like common sense now. Like the first one was empower me as an employee, right? It's like, okay, if the four of us, came together right now, we probably would have guessed that. But for that company to see it on paper, again, that deeply rooted traditional company, we then started talking about, okay, what does it mean to empower employees? Knowing they're all, in their dining rooms and you can't see them every day. What does it mean for them to be successful and for them to be productive? We talk sometimes a lot about devices. We are all so just over-deviced right now, in the sense, specifically with, Teams and email pings and all the notifications that we get. One of the other things we were talking about was, how do we allow people just to get more thoughtful time for planning time, more strategic time? And as a company, how are we supporting them to do that? And that's something that all of us can just practice. I think all of us can get better at doing, turning off notifications, blocking our calendar, setting expectations with our peers. We can do that individually, but it greatly impacts and influences it if the company can set standards as well. And another quick anecdote as we were going through that process with that group, they said, look, we've gone through the past year remotely, and we feel like we've just lost all of those conversations. Ellen, you can see where I'm going. I'm setting up Ellen to talk about the digital tools we use. They felt like they just lost conversations. They were talking, in brainstorm sessions and meetings. Nothing was being captured. If we were in the room, we'd probably capture it on a whiteboard with sticky notes. And they just felt like they lost a year's worth of productivity. So we started talking to them about, more effective ways to collaborate. And I'm going to hand it over to Ellen here, and she can tell you a little bit more about how we've been helping clients do that.
Yes, and just, on that device fatigue, we've done a lot of work. How do we break up the monotony and use tools that maybe we've been using for a long time and sort of plus them up or utilize them in new ways? I've been at Slalom a couple of years now, but since I started, I was introduced to a tool called Miro. I don't know if you use it at NASRE. And we were definitely, using it pre-pandemic. It was love at first sight for me, so I definitely started leaning into it right when I started. Looking back now on the past year and a half, I don't know how we would have done really most of the work that I did this past year in terms of collaborating with clients. And we had a funny situation because, we're design thinkers, we're creative thinkers, we like analog, we like our Post-it notes. I have some up over here. And we were so excited recently to get back together as a team, be in person, have that energy in the room. I think we were talking about this earlier. Simon Sinek, I think, was talking about it earlier. We're capturing, we've got our Post-it notes. We're like, yes, this Post-it notes, And by the end of it, the Post-it notes were falling off the wall. Then we realized we had to now capture them. We tried using some tools to capture them visually, but ultimately we had to go do some manual work. We decided by the end, we are never doing this again. It is virtual from here on forward, and to Maura's point, we have everything captured. And what it allows us to do on client teams, and by the end of a project, these Miro boards are our teams. It looks like a bunch of brains exploded, and that's essentially what happened. But we got to capture that explosion, and we have, this history. And even now, working with a client, sort of coming back to a phase 2 of a project after having a break, we can bring that new team into that shared brain that the previous team had before, catch them up, always come back and be like, oh, remember when we did that exercise, or remember that whiteboarding activity we did, and it's always captured, and then you can continue to move on. So I think just these collaboration tools, and even getting creative with Teams and Zoom and the breakout rooms, and there's great tools like Menti and Kahoot, just thinking about how do we engage audiences in new ways, or even just utilizing the chat to get people to participate that maybe aren't like, Maura and I, who are ready and willing to participate or fill the silence. And just, finding that way. And just one other thing that we were talking about yesterday, just meeting culture now. It used to be that if you were virtual, it's like sort of like you're the odd man out. And of course, there's exceptions, and in the startup world, probably not the case. But and so the meeting probably wasn't accommodated to you as a virtual person. And so something we were talking about yesterday, it's like we really need to think about all meetings going forward being hybrid, being, accessible, and also, and it's not just about like, yes, can we make sure we get people to the meetings, but can we get them to participate at the same level? We need to how might we, you can see Maura and I use a lot of how might we language, how might we get them to have the same level of engagement and participation as those that are in the room? So long answer, but.
Yeah. No, it's great though. It's something we can relate to. We use something similar with Mural. So a lot of our conversations, is the brainstorming, all of the exploding brains happening together, and looking like, there was a quantifiable outcome to that. It was also really great when we started to bring our communities back together too, as people could move around as they see fit and really, have a shared experience at the same level, to your point. So looking farther down into the ethos model, let's hit on the T part, because there's been a lot of talk around talent, and it's been fascinating to me as I read articles, and it's not so much where I think the conversation, if you had to guess 8 months ago, was going to head, but now it's, the great resign. People are like, oh, you can't meet me where I am. Goodbye. You can't X, Y, or Z. Goodbye. You can't trust me because I'm not on teams to show that I'm, providing my value through my work. Goodbye. So through the process, and then using the ethos model, talk to us a little bit about some of the strategies that you've either heard from clients, some good practices that you may have come across that people have been using to either retain, acquire top employees, because honestly, at the end of the day, I think all of us can picture our main streets where you drive up and down and it says hiring bonus, hiring, need workers, whatever the message is. I think people are in a scramble, and it's so interesting to have those tables turned.
Yes.
So I don't know, Maura, if you want to start there.
Agreed. It's a fairly simple answer, a longer discussion. Treat everybody like a human being. And that's something that the one client we were talking to. And actually, prior to, I think once we started recording, Paul was asking about if our work has changed, if the business has grown, and we were giving him an example about, us helping digitize some of their experiences. And, once we start looking at just how we're retaining talent, pretty much anyone can go anywhere right now. But as we were doing some of the research, we heard that some of the older systems, some of the customers just didn't feel like they were treated in a human way. They didn't feel like they just, again, we're all humans. We want to be treated, with respect and acknowledged. So I think that's very much in parallel with how we're looking at building our business with employees. Ellen and I are both people leaders, and we've probably cried with and had people cry more than ever before, and have almost celebrated that. We've seen people's kids, we've seen people's animals, we've gotten to know people's plants, and just it's become less about what are you doing. It's become as important as how are you doing, which is we've really tried to almost over-index on shifting toward the how versus the what, which we talk a lot about. We know that retention, Slalom is one of the top workplaces in Connecticut. even Slalom, it's somewhat challenging to retain talent because everyone's sitting here reevaluating what they're doing with their life. We've actually had some people leave and recently come back, our boomerangs, which is really great too. But it's been almost kind of a day-to-day situation. Ellen and I talk a lot about that, how we're continuing to support our people.
Yeah, I think people who are managers or leaders in a company have had to make a really, if they are successful, they've had to shift from managing people to managing work and outcomes, and that's a big ask for a lot of people who've got won promotions, working in a certain pattern. Think about that company that you shared the journey that you've been on with. So I don't know, Laura. April 22, April 23. Okay, pandemic is gone. There are no masks. We burned our masks. Does everything go back to we're going to go back to business as usual? What'll happen?
No, not good. Not good. I actually had a LinkedIn rant on this a couple months ago because it just really, I had a conversation with a friend who I will not out, but we talked, he was, I was just like, oh, well, we got to get back to normal. And, and it just sort of hit me. You can try to just go back to how it was or go back to the old normal. But the people that are coming back to the office, they're not the same people. And I'm saying coming back to the office deliberately, coming into a physical place. We've all been impacted in some way, shape, or form. No, I am not the same person as I was before the unthinkable happened and my life was turned upside down. And so to assume that we can go back, even if it was working perfectly before, to assume that it's going to work, the same thing is going to work perfectly now, it is just wrong because even if the people are the same, you're not dealing with the same workforce.
That's a really interesting point. You're not dealing with the same workforce, even though the names may be exactly the same. So just to flip the discussion just a little bit, listen, I'm a startup. I've invested a lot of time in Connecticut trying to get my POCs off the ground with these big companies. Jeez, where are they? I thought they were in Hartford alone. They're all over the place. What advice would you give to startups who are trying to drive innovation inside an older organization that is actually going through radical internal organizational change and cultural change?
I would say, we've talked a lot about employee experience, and this has been a huge focus of ours. And, I think we do have the pandemic to thank for that. I think one thing that I love about working at startups and that I think, the enterprise community really can take the spirit from is that iterating, right? We know startups iterate on their products every day, all day. Take that same spirit and apply it to your employee experience, and think about your employee experience as you do a product. And what are the cycles that you go through to evaluate your solution? In this case, it's your work model. And continue to make those updates and changes. It's not a one and done kind of situation. We may have, and coming back to our friend Simon today, we may have a pool table. Awesome. Love to play pool on my break. We've got an awesome snack drawer at Slalom, and I totally appreciate that. But what is keeping me at Slalom is that I get to come to work every day and be me, like totally, fully me. And I belong, and that's welcomed, not even welcomed, it's encouraged, and that's what's going to keep people there. And so, I challenge startups, enterprise companies to constantly be talking to your people just as you would your external customers.
The other thing I would add from working at startups, one of the things I loved most was it was always the roll up your sleeves. It was the innovative culture. It seems like a lot of our larger clients right now are struggling with the process of innovation. They all have innovation teams. A lot of them have multiple innovation teams. A lot of them have multiple customer experience teams, yet they still don't understand how to design for the customer. So I do think they're more interested in designing for innovation, and startups are good at that, and that process. And I do think they're also interested in just more creative approaches to doing stuff in a way that they weren't traditionally before. They need to be competitive in different ways now, and I think that has shifted the landscape a bit, for them to be more open to new ways of thinking, which startups are so good at.
So you're bullish, Maura. You think there are more opportunities for startups today than there were before the pandemic?
Yeah, I think there's also, from a federal perspective, there's also just different funding available now as well. Some of our large clients in Hartford are going through considerable change right now, and are shifting, their funding structure and just where they're investing. So it seems like there's fluidity, and change always brings opportunity.
Ellen, what do you think one of the biggest opportunities you've seen so far is? Right, so the change brings opportunity, and heaven knows there's been plenty of change. What's one of the most exciting opportunities or changes you can choose that you've seen?
Not to be predictable, but I just think that the willingness that I'm seeing some companies have now to rethink, even my husband, who works for a very traditional company that honestly I didn't think would ever get to a point of, really virtual work as the norm, has taken that leap. And to me, I think that's exciting. We had Brene Brown also. We got some really A+ speakers at Slalom, but, she was here. She got me very excited because, she just talked about sort of coming back and just the explosion of innovation. I just think there's so many new ideas that we haven't even uncovered yet. I do have an intruder coming, speaking of getting to know children.
If that's okay. In one of the
members.
first episodes we recorded of this, when we went hybrid, my son came into frame and drove a Matchbox car up and over my head. So there have been plenty of guests, dogs, plants. I mean, you name it. We welcome all of them.
Yeah. Well,
Ellen, thank you for reminding me that, because mine are due now. I'm having a great time. I totally forgot that it's bus time. Ellen, just to piggyback on, Paul, your question about Laura, it was your question about just some of the opportunities. I think the other thing that we've seen and we are so happy about is the focus on the end customer, but also the employee, because customers have changed greatly in the pandemic. They now have higher expectations because we're in an even more digitized world. So I think one of the things that we've been really excited about is the willingness to design better for the customer. That's, of course, what Ellen and I do, so we feel valued. But traditional companies really leaning toward that, which has just been a delight to see, knowing that they need to. It's imperative to stay competitive.
Oh, well, this is a great discussion. If people want to find more information about Ethos, about what you've done or your recommendations for adapting a culture to this environment, where should they go, or who should they reach out to?
Great question. I wish I had a quick answer. So slalom.com, Ethos is on our website. Ellen and I are both on LinkedIn. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them on LinkedIn as well and connect.
Okay, great. We'll put them in the show notes. Laura.
I was going to say exactly that. We're going to put them in the show notes. That way, definitely still go to LinkedIn. We'll have those links available as well. And understanding that we are at the top of our time here, favorite question to end the show with, because it's always usually the most insightful. Ellen, we'll start with you, then Maura right after. Ellen, what is your why? Why do you get up every morning and do this?
At Slalom, our hashtag is love your work and life. For me, what's really important to me, and for my team, the thing that gives me the most joy is helping move people forward and reach their goals and advance their careers and whatever that is that they want to do. I happen to also get to do work I love while doing that with and for people I'm working with, but that is what brings me the most joy.
And Maura, what is your why?
I'm going to say, Ellen and I kind of are the same person. So with that said, I'm going to say ditto to that.
We get mistaken for each other all the time.
Plus, being able to be a problem solver every day and not knowing what I'm going to be walking into daily. That's the thing I think we love about consulting. We don't know what we're going to face. And just, figuring it out and having that insurgent mindset and just, that we get a lot of energy from that continued growth. I might not know what I'm doing today. I might figure it out, and then I might learn how to do it. So it's very similar to startup culture. I think that's why I loved working with startups. Consulting is very similar.
Laura, thank you. And for our guests, listen, give us feedback. Tell us who else we should have on. Innovation in this COVID era is, boy, it's a moving target, and we want to help everybody sort of stay on the cutting edge. So definitely listen. Tell your friends, and definitely join us next week. I think, Laura, right? For another episode of the Reimagine podcast. Ellen, Maura, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
both. We want
both.
to especially thank today's sponsors, Launch and Symetra.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend us on iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more great information about this company and other great startups at imagine.nfg.com.